I'd like to address the Barnstormers, the clinicians as they were called. I guess this is still used.
Yeah.
People who got on airplanes and flew out to strange cities and stayed in hotels and got up in the morning and before the store opened and educated the dealers, people about their product and so forth, and then stood on the floor and sold things during the day, and then came back in the afternoon and night and did what was known as a clinic in which you would show. And I'm going to tell something on Tom Piggott now. He may not want me to say, but I heard a couple of dealers talking about Tom's demonstrations. And one of them said to the other, well, I would never buy an instrument based just on a Tom Piggott demonstration. The other guy says, why? He says, because he's too good at covering up what the instrument can't do. So I wonder if Tom and Mike would talk about being Barnstormers, being clinicians, what your experiences were, what kind of resistance you met, how long you did that, and how you got into it.
It seems to me that man's need to express himself and perform really drives the technology. It's not the other way around, always. And one of the things in marketing the synthesizer, which I recognized from Dave in the beginning when we started to do it, was that performance was the way to get the attention. To walk in with just a machine that made all kinds of beep bops and sounds and so forth and so on was all very well and good. But when you were a performer and you could grab the attention of the people who were going to use it, either musical or non-musical, and that's important here, suddenly you have a credibility factor that is derived from your desire to be expressive, to play, and to use that technology. Now, it's no different than somebody trying to market the Percy Grainger machines, paper and tubes and wind and all kinds of crazy machines. When Percy Grainger developed them, he was doing that to make music in a very different way. And in the same with the people in France who did musique concrète. Well, they would take even recorded tape and do retrograde and change speeds and cut it up and glue them back together and so forth. Well, suddenly Alan Pearlman comes along with a way to do that without contraptions, to do it in such a manner that you would be able to glue together a lot of the components that musicians were looking for the purposes of expressing themselves. Well, it hit me real hard. The first ARP Odyssey demonstration that I ever heard was a fellow by the name of Roger Powell, a very, very fine musician and a wonderful human being. And I saw it, and I saw the first one. I think it was made with plexiglass, if I'm not mistaken. I could see through it, and I started to hear things on the musical side as opposed to just sample and holds, ring modulators, and noise generators, which a lot of this generation has basically forgotten about in today's formats for synthesis. In marketing synthesizers, I always would say that Mike and I and Dave put our performance credentials on the line and did that first to establish that these were machines not just meant to be sound effects machines, but to be musical instruments with nuances not possible from other kinds of instruments. And it was funny to me too, as Dave was talking about, one finger, one note. Well, let me tell you something. The last time I heard a French horn play a chord, it was a long time ago. Yeah, real long. In fact, if you start to look at the nuances that melodic instruments are capable of doing, you'll see that there are a generation of very fine performers today. And yes, they're playing polyphonics too. But without the skill developed from monophonic synthesizers and duophonic synthesizers to learn how to squeeze more out of the nuances of the individual keys, the individual notes, and the individual sounds, then you lose a lot of expressive capabilities that are found by using melodic lines, bass lines, and the like. And the other thing that always occurred to me, and this is no slant at any company making synthesizers, but one of the geniuses of this whole system of ARP synthesizers was the fact that you could see what the product was going to sound like by visually looking at the sliders. Because a lot of people who would be playing synthesizers that had mostly round knobs had their eyes have to look at the individual round knob to see where it's set. Whereas with the sliders that Alan has put on the machines and had put on there, you could glance across the whole machine and have a pretty darn good idea, once you were into it, what was going to come out of it. And then be able to grab more than one slider at a time to be able to put those nuances right on the table and make them forever changing. There's, to me, one of the geniuses of Alan Pearlman. It was to take something and make it more visually comprehensible. When we marketed the synthesizers, and there was a team. There's no I here, there's no me here. There is us, and there is we. And what we did was we all worked together to make those patches, to make those performances, to make those clinics, to make those advertisements, to put those records out. In fact, I think Mike Brigida and I probably hold the world's record in the number of Evertone plastic records on the inside. Am I right?
Yeah.
Absolutely right, inside the individual magazines to do it. Now, I've got a lot more to tell you about and share with you in regards to the education field. But the marketing of synthesizers also became stamina. We had to go against people, first of all, the people who were intimidated, who thought, well, you're trying to make an instrument that's going to put me out of business. And there were certainly some heavy-duty confrontations about that. And you had to win them over. You won them over not only by performance, but by explaining to them in the world of music history, there are always going to be changes and evolutions. I mean, how many people major in sackbut? How many people are playing their kithara? There are places in history for musical instruments, but eventually, we're very lucky, the synthesizer became its own category. And there is nothing like an acoustic instrument doing what an acoustic instrument does. And to try to master what an acoustic instrument does with a synthesizer is a wonderful learning skill. It lets you appreciate what's going on in the real world of acoustic instruments. So, in conclusion of this part of my segment before the education one, let me tell you that the biggest thing that all three of us had to do was to politely listen, support, defend, and demonstrate. And that's how you market a new product. You have to find the means by which to make sure that the person who is a musician stays comfortable in their own shoes and that you're giving them another opportunity to walk a little further. That's simple.
Well, we certainly don't lack on this podium we don't have any lack of being able to speak extemporaneously.
What's that word mean anyway?
Yeah.
I need to say something about my friend Tommy here. The first time I met this guy, I came into the factory, and of course I was the international product specialist at the time, playing keyboards and so forth. And my name's Tom Piggott. I play French horn. I said, oh, good, not another keyboard player I got to compete with. And then all of a sudden, he brought out an Odyssey, and he went. I said, okay, I got to go back and practice a little bit. But anyway, just to build on what both of you guys said, we also had a fantastic sales team. And we have a couple of the guys from the sales team here. I can't see you out there, but we got, Rick Parent and Dan Garrett, and those guys, and who else?
Bob Stillman's here.
Okay, Bob. And wow, these guys absolutely loved what they did. You know what, Al? It came back to you because of you, they loved the company, they loved the sounds, they loved doing. We all did. And a couple other things that what David conceived of is the dealer training. We would bring dealers to the factory and show them how to run these things. And we had a couple of different segments. It usually ended up at some Chinese restaurant with a lot of Navy grogs. And that helped to kind of help them sell instruments because I think, like you said, that nothing happens until the sale is made. Yeah. Of course, we're trying to sell synthesizers, but we're trying to have a good time doing it. One thing that you've said a lot, Tom, is features and benefits.
Yeah.
To have something that has a lot of features is good, but it's the benefits. What does it sound like? how, can I make that sound? Can I make it sound like that? And I think, David, I really give you the credit for saying, hey, we got to go out there and just show them what these things sound like. Not necessarily the fact that they have 3 oscillators, gonculator, phrasmatan, and all that stuff. But the fact that, wow, you can make music with these things and you can make it live. Tom and I did some crazy things. All the concerts that we did some demonstrations, but it was more than the music. I can remember when we were playing together, they only played 1 note at a time. So a lot of times I'd be hitting an Odyssey with my foot, or Tom would be playing a couple of notes with his nose and one hand over here and hand over there. We're trying to get people excited with that. And that was a very, very exciting time. I remember the first time I met this guy over here. I was at a trade show, and I heard this great trombone solo. I'm Getting Sentimental Over You. And I just kind of raced around an AM show to find out where it was coming from. It was coming from this guy right here, because you knew that, hey, let's not just talk about this thing, but let's play it and let's let it, people listen to it.
Yeah.
So, anyway.
And having been a former trumpet player, I could use these 3 fingers. And of course, when polyphonic instruments came in, it's like, what's that for? But these guys, of course, really played keyboards, and a new generation came about, because of that. But I really appreciated what Tom said. People are still quite confused, even so. How many monophonic instruments are there in the world? 400 or 500?
Yeah, that's for sure.
This is the basis of Western music. This is individual lines in orchestras and string choirs, brass bands, what have you. Polyphonic instruments, so-called polyphonic, because they're really homophonic. They play chords. A string quartet can have lines that cross each other, and you have all the degrees of freedom that the staff allows you. You write anything you want, and people play the single lines. So it was important, I think, that all of the people who went into the field, as Tom said, defended, because there was so much bias. It was like, what, a keyboard that plays 1 note, what is that, Yeah. We had solo voxes and various and sundry things, claviolines, ondiolines, and things like that prior to the synthesizer.
Yes.
Well, we had a lot of pressure, too, from certain organizations thinking that we were going to take their jobs away.
Oh, yeah.
That the synthesizer would replace the violinist or the trumpet player or the trombone player because of how we created. Remember the resistance we used to get?
The resistance was heavy. I had the opportunity to perform at Symphony Hall in Boston. It was the first time that an electronic instrument had been allowed on Symphony Hall stage, and I used nothing but my ARPs. But when I went into the rehearsal, I was sternly warned not to make the synthesizer try to imitate an instrument, to use only the synthesizer sounds. And they were so rude and so upset by it that they handed me the scores and told me to go home and arrange them for the orchestra and prove that I could do that, which I did. We did stuff from Star Wars and Close Encounters, and I acknowledged that they had some very, very strange things. But one thing that I do have to put on the table here are a couple of funny things, a couple of interesting funny things. Mike and I were invited to become the entertainment for the astronauts and the cosmonauts of the Apollo-Soyuz mission, and that was at the Mosey in Chicago. Because everybody had a fascination with the synthesizers, and they knew that they had sound effects capability as well as music, he and I, and also we knew that the Russians loved country music, he and I put together, really, he and I put together a country tune in which there was pedal steel guitar and a little tap dancer. And the little tap dancer would tap. He would tap to the music. He was the tap dancer. But then at the end, and I know this is not very cool in this day and age, at the end of the country tune, the tap dancer got shot, kind of like the vaudeville hook. What happened was Mike did the shot, and instantly the KGB jumped over the table. They did, and damn near tackled us because it sounded so much like a shot. One more, and I'll let you go on that one. I'm going to get Dave Fredericks on this one. Mike and I were also very pleased that we had the color coding with the little plastic knobs that Dave put together. It was very, very fast visually to find how to do things. And we were playing a concert in Miami. Now, the first thing is we were using an old Vocal Master Shure system. When Michael did his explosion sound, it smothered, it blew. We saw flakes of speakers flying in the air because the sound systems were not designed back then for the wide range of sounds and frequencies that one could attain from a synthesizer. But the funny part of the story was we were out in the sun. It was hot. And we finished the performance, God knows how we got through it, and when I came off stage, 2 policemen came up to me. They thought I was popping pills. You know what it was? It was your darn tops of the sliders. I was sweating on them. I couldn't grab them to move them, so I kept taking them off and putting... But you see, that kind of comedy and that kind of marketing really, really is the result of performance, in my estimation. And we turned it into that. So the bottom line is the marketing, I think that the marketing belongs, the skills in marketing, to the team, not just to one person.
Right.
It is definitely Alan, definitely was David, definitely this David here was really the one on the front who took the biggest blows and the biggest punches by merging technologies. Merging back then was simple. It was using an organ and putting a lead line synthesizer on the top to give it credibility. And then eventually, all 3 of us started to play nothing but the synthesizer, and Alan Pearlman was almost in tears. He was so happy that we were turning those individual instruments into mini orchestras without having to have the sound of the polyphonics all the time. And that marketing still holds true today. If you use your performance skills to win people over, then you can introduce them to the technology and at least they'll listen.
Yeah, very good.